December 9, 2017. My name is Kuldeep Singh Randhawa. I have made a number of videos on YouTube concerning various problems in British Columbia, a province of Canada, a nation that's considered at the forefront of human rights. This video is actually done on behalf of my friend Ivanco Keremelevski. Ivanco is actually a landscaper when he moved to Canada in Vancouver. Came to Canada in May 2001 and then moved to Vancouver in December 2002. He started his landscaping business, and then soon after that, after some years of making a considerable amount of money as a landscaper, he was involved in a number of accidents in which eventually he was considered as a person receiving disability. And as a result of some of his matters in court, I have realized a friend who became a friend from the courts itself, that he was also subjected to considerable intimidation, harassment, and even was attacked in the court by sheriffs for raising some concerns that he wanted to put across to the judge in requesting an interpreter on one of his cases. So having seen some of the material that he has showed me, it is clear that in one of his cases, the case number 2, which I would refer as the accident that took place in New Westminster, it had taken place on May 30th, 2005. There are 2 other accidents in which it was considered that the other parties were at fault, but despite that, no real compensation was given whatsoever to Ivanco. And so there is other pending matters, and this video concerns itself with the accident that took place in New Westminster. So this video has actually been authorized by Ivanco Keremelevski. I'm being his voice here to tell the world as to what's happening here in his case. And no doubt has happened to other people who have been in similar experiences. And so we are hoping that those individuals would come forward and contact us. The reason for putting this video out is to, one, expose the problem so that it can be solved. I'm quite certain that if some justices and lawyers actually, as officers of the court, had followed the law and obeyed it, then these videos would not be necessary. But we live in a society which has somewhat become immoral, in which the general attitude of the public is to remain silent. Could be because of fear, or simply they don't care. But my concerns here are for humanity. My concerns here are for my friend Ivanco. He is a Christian and a strong believer of his religion and faith. He has told me a story of the Good Samaritan. So my acts here in telling this, making this video for him, using the facts that he's shown me and the material and the evidence, is no different to what a Good Samaritan would do. I am a Sikh. In my religion, it is told to us that we have to help other people. I'm certain that in the Christian religion and other faiths, that the similar sort of attitudes exist where you're required to help other people. Attitudes such as love your neighbor. Well, we all have to love humanity, and people do come here to Canada thinking that Canada is a nation that stands for human rights throughout the world. But first we have to deal with some of the issues right here within British Columbia and perhaps other provinces. So let me first explain that when a person seeks legal advice, often he is not given that advice, and nor is he given proper representation. Often this is done by lawyers who are somewhat in a conflict of interest because they want to make additional fees. But when they take on a case, it's always taken on the basis that it's easy to succeed. So if you are in a motor vehicle accident and you're rear-ended, the chances are there's lots of lawyers who would come forward. But if you're not rear-ended, or when the going is difficult because you're going to get a lot of resistance, or somewhat you're manipulated, the lawyer is actually informed that this person should not be given proper legal representation. Often that is never disclosed by the lawyers, but one can see when a lawyer is not doing his job. And so there's a lot of manipulation taking place. And eventually, in around 2011, Ivanco was declared as vexatious. He was declared vexatious on the basis that he has an invalid case, or he has no proper case. When actually, when you consider that a lawyer has taken the case, did that lawyer not say in taking the case that Ivanco has no real case here? Is that what was told to Ivanco at that time? When ICBC declared the other party in this accident as 100% liable, are these factors not to be considered in an application where a person is being declared vexatious? If a person is entitled to legal representation, if he has a poor command of English, for example, or he doesn't understand some of the rules, so because this person is not a lawyer, he has to be given extra attention and care. Instead, he is declared as vexatious. This is the legal system that is not interested in providing justice. But the reason why a person is declared vexatious, one can simply consider simple rules, or questions of reason is what I would normally term. For example, in this particular case, the discoveries were not complete. They were not complete because certain documents were not disclosed that were required. So part of the discoveries were done, and so because of that discovery, certain facts were actually exposed and proven, and that is why we're in a position to make this video. But the documents that were not disclosed implies that the discovery is not complete, and so the merits of the case cannot be adjudicated. And so how can a person be declared vexatious when discovery is not even complete? These are simple tests that one can use in the court before going to a judge and having the case reopened, for example. And when a person is declared vexatious because what they're really trying to do is actually a mechanism of concealing the fraud, because they know that if the documents are disclosed, then the frauds will be exposed and certain individuals will have to be now protected, so the matter is brought before a judge. And so certain rules exist in the Supreme Court rules of British Columbia that a person can be declared vexatious. Or if there's a scandal, then the matter should be thrown out. Well, these are ways of protecting individuals who are involved in white-collar crimes. Because the crimes committed by people on the road when they're stealing a candy bar are very easy to assess, and the police obviously turns up. But when the sophistication or the crimes are committed by individuals who are professionals, then it requires individuals similar in mind to come forward and investigate these individuals. It could be lawyers, it could be organizations, but certainly a justice of the court who has taken an oath of office has a right to ensure that the person is entitled to justice and therefore can order an investigation. And this is exactly what happened in my case when I went before Justice Verhoeven for a petition. A petition is a mechanism in which a person who has been deprived of rights can go to court and make an application seeking a petition for a public inquiry, for example. That is exactly what I had done. Over there, similar arguments were made, and I was simply declared vexatious. And that order then is then used again and again and again. So now you have a person who is subjected to various frauds, who is now victimized further and further and further. And this is what's happening here in British Columbia. So in order for this problem to be resolved, certain things have to be done. The first step is, one, you can contact us and I can make a video, or once a organization is created, a certain fund can be set aside for making such videos, because it's not cheap to make videos like this. But I'm doing it here for the benefit of my friend Ivanco Keremelevski, who has actually assisted me, and so we have over time consoled ourselves. And we say prayers for each other, which is the good thing to do. Because when you go to court, one puts your hand in front of the judge. You place your hand on the Bible, or you affirm. That is done because that is the faith is required within the legal proceedings. So people of faith have to act in a certain way. So perhaps the oath which is given should not be taken based on the fact that the person giving has a choice of giving an affirmation, or whether it's putting one's hand on the Bible or another religious book. Perhaps it should be decided if the judge is a person of faith. Maybe he can decide that he doesn't have faith, and so therefore don't take any oath before me by putting one's hand on the Bible. Because no point taking an oath, affirming it, or putting one's hand on the Bible if the person within these proceedings who is a trier of fact is one without faith. It's just logical common sense, because the whole basis is one assumes that when one goes to court, you're going to be treated fairly. So clearly that is not the case here. So when you have a lawyer who has actually been told, and that conversation is between lawyers, and you're talking about your client, for example, well, clearly the attorney-client privilege has been breached. The permission is not given by the client for you to speak about your matters to other lawyers, but those discussions always take place, and so there's a certain prejudice created. And so one of the functions of this video, which is not just for other people who have been in similar situations, but for the lawyers who are seeing this video, to appreciate that there has been an injustice incurred here, and Ivanco Keremelevski is actually not vexatious, and he deserves proper representation. It's also made for the judges of the court, who can now consider the facts, because now they've been compelled to do so. When the oath of office of a judge is such that one should not have to be compelled, because your primary job is to look at the facts and the merits. And if you're not going to consider the merits, then you may as well return all the fees that were paid by people seeking justice in the Supreme Court. Because if you're not going to consider merits, there's no point having a legal proceeding. So the bias and the prejudice that's occurring here is not implicit. It's not the case that these individuals are unaware of what's going on. Because when people like myself, for a period of 7 to 8 years, have gone to the court and appeared before many judges, I have alerted them to this problem. I'm sure there are other people who go to court and do the same. So how is it that you do not understand? How is it this bias, which is actually a natural bias, is not implicit, because you're aware of it, is part and parcel of who you are. And so this problem has to be exposed and dealt with. The politicians of this nation have been contacted on numerous occasions by me. We are not going to be appealing anymore to those politicians who have continued to ignore us, particularly those politicians who belong to an ethnic community. And being a Sikh, I know that the Sikh politicians have not spoken out. I'm sure other politicians belonging to other ethnic faiths living in Canada have done the same. And so it's a typical pattern that's taking place here. So in stating this video to the public, we are in particularly approaching lawyers who have a decency and a will to protect their profession from misrepresentation, because this profession is totally in disrepute. It has been for a number of years, and they have to now come forward. For those of you who care about your profession and want to make a change, just like I intend to make a change here, and come forward and help my friend Ivanco. I'm not saying do it for free. I'm saying is you can make an application to the court that may be done on pro bono basis and present the facts to the judge and say, Mr. Ivanco Keremelevski has been assaulted in the court, has been denied justice, has been ill-treated, has been abused, intimidated, and he's entitled to compensation, and that compensation should be decided in that application, and that application can then be result in damages being paid, whether that may be $10,000 or whatever it is, so that now Ivanco has funds to pay his lawyer. So he doesn't have to come to court making a indigent application. In this case, of course, he's entitled to that anyways because of his disability. But the point here is this. He is entitled to compensation because these are activities that are taking place by a court that is not operated lawfully. And so this video is titled as a request for lawful representation. And in order for the lawyers to consider this, I'm going to discuss 3 facts or merits that have been taken from the discoveries that were partly done. And I'm going to discuss them in 3 simple points as A, B, C. What is A? A is the fact that Ivanco was actually traveling east on 6th Avenue and he was coming from the west. So he had to cross McBride. And in doing so, he was approaching this intersection where there were 3 lanes. If you turn right, you end up going towards Petula Bridge. If you turn left, you end up going north. If you want to go straight, you have to remain in the middle lane. So Ivanco was in the middle lane going across McBride. The vehicle that he was driving was a Jeep Liberty, and it had a trailer at the back with some tools. And so the speed of this vehicle with a trailer cannot be excessive. And then he was going to cross over McBride. The other person, and I won't discuss what vehicle he's driving because that's part of the 3 points I want to make here. The other person was turning left to go towards Petula Bridge. So that left turn is not in line with the straight lane that's going to cross over. So the path of travel has been obstructed by a person that resulted in the accident taking place when the lights were actually green. So ICBC had actually declared the other person to be 100% liable. So that's the first fact, that Ivanco was traveling straight and his path of travel was interrupted by this other individual, and that is quite solid information and evidence that is undisputed. His right to cross over was impeded. And so the second point, which is B, is that ICBC declared him 100% liable. When one considers this, what were the facts taken by ICBC and the investigators, and why were those facts then overturned? And so why was that not considered by the judge in which he was declared vexatious? So that is actually a strong point here. The fact that ICBC declared the other party 100% liable, there was some reason why the facts were overturned. What were those reasons? Were those reasons put before the judge who decided that Ivanco is declared as being vexatious when clearly he is not? And that goes on to the third part, which is the fact that when a person is being declared vexatious, how can that person be declared vexatious when the discoveries are incomplete? What was the evidence in those documents that were not disclosed? So point number C is the fact that Ivanco has clearly affirmed that the vehicle involved by the other person in this accident was actually a Honda, and the color of that vehicle was grayish, a Honda Civic. When it was stated in discoveries under oath that the vehicle involved was a Toyota Echo, and the color of that vehicle is gold. So there's two things here. The first is a person who's involved in the accident has a good idea of the vehicle that's involved in the accident, and Ivanco is quite clear on that before he was taken away to hospital in an ambulance. Second thing is the color is not something that one can mistake. There may be some confusion, for example, if both vehicles were the same color, but this is not the case here. So clearly, when someone is taken away in an ambulance, the RCMP officers attend, and then they do an investigation. And so they would know what color of the car is, what vehicles were involved. So when the vehicles are actually swapped, that's a major problem. And of course, I do not want to discuss all of the evidence in this video, because that would perhaps prejudice Ivanco in the legal proceedings, and he has authorized only this much to be disclosed, and that's what I'm going to disclose. But these 3 pointers, A, B, C, are sufficient for the lawyer to understand that if indeed the documents were not disclosed, because what they're doing here is actually concealing a fraud, and that may involve some of the officers involved in the investigation who are directly involved in this matter. Now, it would be incorrect for me to say that RCMP have officers that are totally corrupt. That will be incorrect. But to say that some officers are corrupt would be justified. And so these individuals have to be held accountable. They have to be investigated. And at the very least, they have to be punished, because they've taken an oath, just as a judge has, just as the lawyers have. And it's really unacceptable that individuals who have not taken an oath are telling the truth, and those that have are perhaps presenting false information. So we need to be very clear here that when you conceal a fraud and it continues, that the damages that the person who is coming to court to seek justice, who considers himself to be a victim, is then victimized even further, and then ill-treated, mistreated, intimidated, harassed, and even taken down within the courts. If you consider all of these activities, they are similar to what one would consider as activities of organized crime. And so there are so many people who have been victimized in this way. I'm not saying there's a large number of people, but these individuals do need to be given justice, because they have been singled out as not only belonging to a minority, but because of the fact that there are very few people who are victimized, and the law doesn't say that because you belong to an ethnic community, and because there's few of you involved in these activities in which you are mistreated and mishandled, that you don't deserve justice. That's not what the laws of this nation say. Because what happens is this: when you have a situation based on racial prejudice, where one community is targeting the ethnic community, take the First Nations for example, it starts off with there, then it goes on to the Sikh community, then it goes on to the Macedonian community, and then it's going to go on to everyone. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, if you are someone who wants to speak the truth, because the truth of the matter is that those individuals within the court system are quite few. And that circle of deception that's taking place, consisting of some lawyers, some judges, it's a very small number of people, and is giving a bad name to all those other justices that are trying to do a good job. And sometimes when, unfortunately, When one justice has declared a person as vexatious, then because of the respect that one judge has for the other judge, there's an assumption taking place. And that assumption is that we can't go against the other judge. But your duty is to look at the merits. It doesn't matter if the previous judge has faulted. If that is the case, that person should be removed. He can be impeached, but often that is never done. But times are changing. We are appealing so that we can have a better world, a better Canada. We've just celebrated 150 years. I would like Canada to be a place where one can really speak positively and be proud of their nation in which they're living. So I think there's a considerable amount of information I've stated here. All that's really needed now is for individuals to come forward, and you can do so by contacting me, and I can pass on the information to my friend Ivanco. My email is kuldiprandhawa5@gmail.com. That's KULDIPRANDHAWA5@gmail.com. Or you can contact Ivanco Keremelevski directly on his email, which is IVANCOKEREMELEVSKI@yahoo.com. That's Ivanco Keremelevski@yahoo.com. And so I'm making, in closing, the best person that I can really appeal to is to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of British Columbia. When the matters within the courts are based on improper adjudication, then it's not a matter for the Court of Appeal. This is a matter that can be corrected through an order ex mero motu, where the order is not simply 2 or 3 lines, but it should be clear enough that this matter should be adjudicated again with a case planning conference held first, and then the actual hearings that need to take place. And also the costs should be waived until this initial hearing is done, which could be a single hearing in which case planning conference can be done, and also declaring a person as unvexatious, perhaps with an apology and some compensation ahead of time. A partial compensation where the other compensation can be decided later. And if this happens, when certain lawyers are held accountable, when compensation is given out, then a person doesn't have to go and apply for indigent status. There's a certain dignity involved there. People do not want to come forward like this to court. When certainly some of their funds are held and they have been deprived of their rights, I think they're entitled to some compensation, even if it means that compensation being ordered from the British Columbia government or ICBC Corporation, where they have to now pay the money, because if they have actually been involved in some improper acts, then that money should come forward first, and then lawyers are told that you cannot walk away from this client until the entire proceeding is over. If that is happening, then basically there's a good chance that people like myself and like Ivanco will not be treated in the way that we have been. With that, I can say, God bless.